the sources you sent for this deep dive, they kick off with a really disruptive idea.
Mm-hmm. It's a foundational claim, for sure.
That the dollar bill in your wallet, the one you earn, the one you spend every single day.
It's not just currency.
Exactly. By its legal definition, it's actually an instrument of debt.
And that's where it all begins.
Mm-hmm.
The argument these sources lay out is that U.S. banking law, it actually recognizes two completely distinct types of currency.
Two types running at the same time.
Why? One, the one we all use, fundamentally creates debt, and the other, legally, creates none.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack this very specific and, let's be honest, unconventional legal theory.
We'll trace the claims through history, right?
Okay.
Focusing on that really pivotal year, 1913.
And we're going to get right into the specific statute, Title 12, U.S. Code, Section 411, because that's what proponents of this lawful money doctrine point to as the path for what they claim is tax-free income.
You know, this requires a pretty cautious lens. It makes me think of that quote from the economist John Kenneth Galbraith.
What was that one?
He said, "The study of money is one in which complexity is used to disguise truth, or to evade truth, not to reveal it."
That feels very relevant here.
It does. And we should be clear, the sources are presenting what is, a fringe legal theory. It's based on a very specific reading of banking law, not tax law. We're here to synthesize and report on what they're arguing.
Okay, let's unpack this then. To even understand the two currencies, we have to go back to that starting point you mentioned. The year 1913.
That year is everything. It's the moment the entire financial relationship between, the American citizen and the federal government it fundamentally changes.
Before 1913, things were completely different. The sources really emphasize that for generations, most Americans were not required to file an annual income tax return.
And the country still ran.
Right. We built roads, funded a military, set up schools.
All of it. But it was funded through things like tariffs, excise taxes, indirect methods, not a direct tax on your wages.
But in 1913, that all changed. There were two huge pieces of legislation, the twin pillars, as the sources call them.
Precisely, two laws that created the financial world we all live in now.
So let's start with the one that deals with money itself.
That would be the Federal Reserve Act.
Yeah.
This is what established the Federal Reserve. Now, the sources argue, and this is key, that the Fed is a private for-profit entity.
They use that analogy.
Yeah, that it's no more federal than FedEx. Just because the word is in the name doesn't mean it's a government agency.
And they point to the history, right? Books like The Creature from Jekyll Island, detailing these secret meetings of bankers who designed the whole system.
Exactly, framing it as a private mechanism to create currency based on debt. And then that same year, the second pillar drops into place.
The Revenue Act?
The Revenue Act, which gave us the modern federal income tax and, crucially, the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS.
Okay, so the timing is the whole foundation of this doctrine. If the Fed is private and it's issuing debt, how does that connect to the income tax?
That's the thesis. Every single Federal Reserve note in FRN is created when the Fed loans it to the U.S. government.
And that loan has interest.
It's an interest-bearing loan. So every dollar is born as a dollar of debt. It creates this perpetual obligation for the government to pay interest on its own money supply.
So the government now needs a huge, reliable way to collect money just to pay the interest on the money it borrowed from the Fed.
You got it. In this framework, the IRS was created to be the debt collection arm of and for the Federal Reserve. Its job is to make sure the government has the funds to service that massive, always growing debt.
That is a staggering claim. It reframes the entire purpose of the income tax. It's not for roads and schools in this view. It's just to service the debt created by the money itself.
The bottom line, according to this theory, is, well, it's simple. No Federal Reserve System, no need for an income tax, no IRS.
And the sources point to the long-term result of this system, right? The loss of value.
A huge loss of value. They say the U.S. dollar has lost something like 96% of its purchasing power since 1913. That constant devaluation is, they argue, the built-in consequence of using debt as money.
Okay, so as that's the debt instrument, the FRN, what is the alternative? What's the other currency?
That is the United States note, or the USN. And understanding this difference is, it's everything to the tax argument.
So let's just quickly recap the FRN, the Federal Reserve note.
Right. It's issued by the private Federal Reserve. It creates debt for the government. And because it creates the very debt that the income tax was designed to pay for, any income you get in FRNs is taxable.
Now, the United States note, the USN, How is it different?
Fundamentally different. It's issued directly by the U.S. Congress.
Which is a power given in the Constitution.
An explicit constitutional authority. So it completely bypasses the central bank. And because of that, its creation does not put a debt obligation on the government. There's no principal or interest to repay. It's debt-free money.
And that's the pivot. If the income tax is tied to the debt currency,
Then income received in the debt-free currency, the USN, should be outside the scope of that tax. That's the entire premise. It's about which currency you choose to receive.
but I've never seen a United States note. I don't think anyone has.
And you won't. The physical printing of them actually stopped back in 1971.
So the paper is gone, but the legal distinction, that's still on the books.
It is. And this is the critical link. The proponents point directly to one statute, Title 12 U.S. Code, Section 411. This is the cornerstone of the whole strategy.
Okay, 12 U.S.C. 411. What does the language actually say?
It's about Federal Reserve notes. And the key phrase, according to these sources, is that the notes shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand.
Shall be redeemed.
Shall is mandatory. It's not maybe. It shall be. And they interpret lawful money to mean the debt-free United States note. So the law says the debt currency must be exchanged for the debt-free currency if you demand it.
Why would a law like that even exist, let alone just stay on the books, sort of buried?
The sources have a pretty dramatic origin story for it,
Yeah.
and it's tied to the Great Depression.
Okay.
It's linked to a resolution in 1933, HER 192. This was when FDR took the U.S. off the gold standard for its citizens. He made people surrender their gold for paper dollars that were no longer backed by anything.
I can imagine that didn't go over well.
The sources quote a congressman at the time, Louis McFadden, who apparently called it theft and treason.
Strong words.
Yeah. And that created a huge legal risk for the government, the risk of being sued for theft. So the doctrine argues Congress had to create a permanent legal remedy, a safeguard. And that was this redemption clause in 12 U.S.C. 411.
So they created a legal out to avoid that liability, and they could never repeal it, or they'd reopen that old wound, so they just made it obscure.
That's the claim. And that brings us to the practical part. How do you actually use it? It's all about breaking the presumption.
The domesticated elephant analogy from the sources, I loved that.
It's a great analogy, right? The baby elephant is tied to a small stake and learns it can't escape. As an adult, it's strong enough to rip the stake out of the ground, but it never tries because it still believes it can't.
So the whole financial system just presumes we're using Federal Reserve notes.
It's the default. It's the learned belief. This strategy is all about being the adult elephant and actively, legally shattering that presumption.
And how do you do that? You have to create a record.
A formal, documented paper trail. An evidentiary record showing that you have elected to use USNs for every single dollar of income you receive.
Okay, this is where we need to get specific. Let's say someone is listening and wants to understand the actual steps. How do they do this?
It's very procedural, and it depends on how you get paid. Let's start with an old-fashioned paper check. When you get a check, you have to endorse it on the back with a very specific phrase. It has to say verbatim, lawful money is demanded pursuant to 12 U.S.C. 411, and then you sign it.
So you're making a legal demand right on the instrument itself.
At the moment of negotiation, yes.
Yeah.
But most people get direct deposit, W-2 wages. You can't write on a digital transaction.
Right. So what's the move there?
It's a preemptive action. You have to create a new direct deposit authorization form, one that has that 12 U.S.C. 411 redemption language built into it.
And you give that to your HR department.
No. And this is a crucial distinction. You do not send it to your employer
Why not?
because your employer is just a conduit.
Yeah.
The ultimate authority over the currency is the U.S. Treasury. So you send that form with your demand for lawful money directly to the Treasury.
Wow. So you're establishing your choice at the highest level.
That's the idea. And you have to do this for everything. What about capital gains or retirement money, crypto profits?
It's becoming more and more common for people to have multiple income streams.
And each one needs its own separate, meticulously filed documentation. For a brokerage account, you might need a document sent to the firm saying all incoming gains must be redeemed. Then a second one for any money you withdraw from the account.
It sounds like a comprehensive source-by-source mandate. The goal is to cover every single penny.
Absolute coverage. So that if the IRS ever looks, they see a complete history of redemption demands. A solid paper trail.
Okay. So you do this all year, you document everything, then it's tax time, you still have to file a 1040 form. How does it look?
You absolutely file a 1040. You report your gross income, same as always. But then, proponents say, you take a specific deduction.
A deduction for what?
The deduction is for the exact amount that was, and this is the key phrase, redeemed for lawful money, 12 U.S.C. 411.
So if you redeemed your entire income, the deduction matches your gross income.
Precisely. Which brings your taxable income way down. It results in a very low, or ideally, a zero adjusted gross income, AGI.
And the AGI is the number that your tax liability is actually calculated on.
Exactly. By legally deducting the amount redeemed into the debt-free currency, you eliminate the basis for the federal tax.
So the question is, why hasn't this been closed? If this legal avenue exists, why wouldn't the IRS or Treasury just shut it down?
That's the big question they address. And the answer, they claim, goes all the way back to 1933 in the gold seizure.
That original liability.
They say if Congress repealed 12 U.S.C. 411, they would reopen that massive legal liability. So instead, they keep it on the books, but they rely on complexity and on the fact that almost no one knows about it.
Okay, let's talk about the real world, the trade-offs, the risks.
First, the limitations. This is non-negotiable. This strategy applies only to federal and state income tax.
Okay.
It does not get you out of Social Security tax, Medicare tax, property taxes, sales tax, none of that.
So you're still paying into Social Security and Medicare?
You are. The argument is those taxes fund specific things, whereas the income tax is uniquely tied to the debt service of the FRN system.
Okay, what about the risk? What happens when the IRS gets this 1040 with a zero AGI?
So according to the sources, a full-blown audit is actually rare. The biggest risk is getting what's called a frivolous filing notice.
And how do they say to handle that?
They call it a bureaucratic bluff. It's a form letter meant to scare you into changing your filing. The advice is to formally respond with your entire evidentiary package.
All the documentation.
All of it. The demands, the proof of mailing to the Treasury, everything. The claim is, once they see the documented election under banking law, the risk goes way down.
You shared that anecdote from the source material that really illustrates this.
Yeah, there was this account of IRS agents actually visiting a client's home.
Wow.
Yeah, but instead of arguing tax code, the person just presented their binder. Meticulously organized. All the 12 U.S.C. 411 redemption records.
And what happened?
The agents looked through it, saw the documentation, and apparently concluded they had no further business there, and they left. The strategy is to overwhelm their presumption with documented facts.
But there is a huge practical drawback to having a zero AGI.
This is the biggest trade-off, absolutely. Traditional lenders, especially for mortgages, they look at your AGI.
It's all they look at sometimes.
Right, and if your AGI is zero for the last 3 years, you will not qualify for conventional loan. You're trading tax relief for traditional borrowing power.
So what are the mitigation strategies if you need a mortgage down the line?
There are a couple. One, you could work with alternative lenders, ones that look at bank statements and assets, not just AGI. Or two, you can be selective about it.
Meaning you don't redeem everything.
Exactly. Maybe you only apply the 12 U.S.C. 411 demand to, say, half your income. You still save a ton in taxes, but you leave enough on the table to show an AGI of, $150,000, enough to still qualify for the loan you need. It's a calibration.
That makes sense. It really paints a clear picture. So we've covered the difference between the debt-based FRN and the debt-free USN. We've traced it all back to 1913 and detailed this legal choice in 12 U.S.C. 411. The whole thing rests on asserting a choice that's, well, legally available but very intentionally hidden.
And proponents even frame this as a patriotic act. They claim that when you redeem FRNs for lawful money, those debt instruments are removed from the Treasury's balance sheet.
So it's a private benefit that also serves a public good, in their view.
Exactly. You're helping yourself, and you're, according to them, helping lower the national debt by taking debt instruments out of circulation.
We started with that idea that complexity is used to disguise truth. And if something this fundamental, a difference in currency that affects taxation, has been legally preserved but buried for almost a century, it makes you wonder.
It does.
What other significant, actionable choices might be hidden out there? Not in the laws we all look at, the tax code, but in these overlooked corners of the law that define our relationship with the government and our money.
It really pushes you to question the basic assumptions of the system we all operate in every day. And that's the real power of digging into sources like these. It's the critical thought they spark.